my foster father, as he was, he died on the Somme. And mother, of course, was a widow, and all that means at that time. But I didn't really have much of a childhood in terms of I was looked after, but there's no family around you, if you know what I mean. I had other foster brothers, two brothers. One was in the Buffs in North Africa. The other one was in the Naval Reserve. And I didn't see very much of them at all, because I was much younger than they were. And just on odd occasions when they sort of dropped in to sort of say hello kind of thing, you know. But I didn't particularly miss it. I had a lot of friends, and it's not, I suppose in some ways people might say, oh, you know, you didn't have much of a family life, but then it was the way of the things in those days. You know, I mean, you were thankful for whatever you had, and that was the end of it, sort of thing, you know. I walked out and went up to the recruiting office in Western Road, as it was at that time, Queen's Road rather, and I signed up and joined the army. When I got home, I said to my mother, foster mother, went to the old school, and she just looked at me and she said, oh yes, she said, when do you go? I said, oh, about a fortnight's time. She says, well, let me know in good time, I'll make you some sandwiches. And why did I join the Paras? And the answer is quite simple. When I looked around me and saw people still adopting the tactics they were accustomed to on the Western Front, digging trenches, putting up barbed wire and that sort of thing, and I thought to myself immediately, there is only one thing to do, and that is to join a regiment where everybody wants to be there. That's the key. Everybody wants to be there. So I enrolled. It was difficult for me because I was very mature at the time, and I had all the physical things to do as well. And but anyway, I got through the various phases, etc. And of course, at that point, that was when I joined the Paras.
If I'm not mistaken, you lied. You said about how you were quite immature, but had you not lied about your age to join the Paras?
Yeah, I have actually. I said I was, well, I was only 16 actually, but I was going on 18. So, but of course in those days, providing people could find a pulse, you were in. That was about it, you know. It was a complete situation like you'd see on...
Carry On.
Yeah. Well, it was very, very tough because, as you say, I was immature, but obviously I had to conform. You know, I had to do all the runs and everything else that were, you know, put to you. Well, there were these logs. They were behind your head. You had to reach over, put them down, pick them up, put them back again. The road runs, I can't remember exactly what they were. They were about 35 miles or so. I think it was 50 miles on some situations. And to be honest, I felt wonderful, really, because I managed to do these sort of things, if you know what I mean. Despite everything else, you know, I thought, well, I'm making the grade. The thing about it was to maintain the requirements of a unit. Everything that you did was done together. Now, when you went on leave together, you all went. And when you used to go down to the, well, you'd pass the ATS billets there, and they'd all got up and leaned out the window, "Hooray!" And you went to Victoria Station, and you rendezvoused back at the Victoria Station once your leave was ended. But of course, we used to go on leave at the same time. See, there was no business of saying, oh, well, wait, I've got a week's leave coming, something like that. You just went. That was it. And it worked very well, I think. You know, you get continuity of training, which is essential. And very good. I recommend it. The old Whitley aircraft, that's what we used. But of course in those days you went in an aperture under the floor and you sat on the floor, as it were, and shuffled along as best you could. And they were nightmarish for one thing. One thing, you thought everything was going to get snarled up. And the other thing was, of course, on the actual aperture, the sides sort of slope inwards, like that. And if you happen to bump your parachute pack behind you, it would throw you forwards and smash your face on the opposite wall. Oh, it was all good fun in those days.
What, do you remember your first jump?
Oh, yes. Never forget it.
Tell me.
Yeah, well, the first jump, of course, you see, the instructors, they had ground stuff, and you sat on the aperture, and the dispatcher used to shout, "Action stations 1, go!" And you made an exit, well, down to the floor, so there was it. Of course, when you got up aloft, the attitude was rather different. It was a sort of, well, when you're ready, you know, sort of as though you were always ready. So it was jolly good fun. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I did parachute jumps for charity when I was over 90.
What was your setup then? What sort of parachute did you have? What type of parachute did you?
Well, I think they called it the X-type. It was I don't know whether it can't be the same as obviously in the aircraft, but the main thing about it was, of course, it had been designed where here all the straps went in there, so that when you just turned it and hit it, that was it.
Were there any moments during your flight training that you can remember that you want to share?
Well, I didn't really. I suppose, a bit naive, I suppose. I never really thought about that at all. You know, as far as I was concerned, life is going to go on, and that's it, sort of thing. It never occurred to me that anything would be, other than right.
When did you move to Newbury then, and when did things slightly change?
Well, it was just before D-Day, and whilst we didn't know the name of the battery, we found a place. Actually, there's a plaque there now, because down at the bottom of that, just at the hill, that's when we built the replica gun battery. And they got the airborne engineers in, they put up scaffolding, etc., made it a big camouflage thing, and made it look, right. And we used to practice, you had to try to remember where the machine guns were, etc., etc. And of course, funny thing is, it's like everything else. The best laid plans of mice and men, nothing goes according to plan. Nothing. And the idea was that 3 gliders would crash land on the casements inside the battery, or the battalion attack from outside. Well, of course, in the event, first of all, the glider didn't get off the ground over in England. Anyway, was overloaded. Said a bit odd to me, but however. And then the one that I was in and Gordon Brown was in, they came over the coast, and their parachute and rescue gear was damaged. So they came down, and we were the only ones that got there, which means you're 2/3 down on the strength to start with. But
how did it feel when you were flying? And what's the noise like?
Well, it's just a humming. You can't really hear the aircraft engine. You can hear the swish, and it's like when they cast off. They cast off, then you hear a lot more switching as it comes down. And of course, when we crashed down, the flak gun caught us as we came over. And the flak gun caught us. I got hit in the legs, and we crashed into it's a big foliage area, and there was firing coming from that, so we returned the fire, and they broke it off and went, but that was when I was left with 2 unwounded Germans.
How quickly were you in action when you landed then? Immediately?
Oh, no time at all. Well, there's a sort of huge shrubs here, and the firing was coming from there at us. So we had to get out and return the fire, obviously. And at the end of the day, they must have broke it off because we were still alert, and they seemed to disappear. I think they were from the 16th Infantry Battalion, I think. If I remember rightly.
And obviously you're distracted by this fire that's going on over here. Where is the battery in relation to you at this point?
It's behind us.
So you're not engaging with that at this point?
Yeah, it was behind us, because the reason being that when we started to engage this patrol, which is only a fairly big patrol that was coming up, they obviously were making for the battery. So we had to hold them off, because they came up from, funnily enough, over in Merville, there's a little place called Gonnerville, and that is where we formed up. And they came up from there, so they must have gone there after we'd left and retraced their steps up to the battery.
So you've been injured in the Horsa. You've crash landed. You're immediately in action with this this patrol that's coming, trying to get into the battery. You've managed to beat them off. How did you then get to this point where you're with the injured Germans?
Well, what happened? The patrol that was in the glider that crashed when it crossed the coast. Captain Gordon Brown was in that.
Yeah.
He found me, and he said, "Well, you can't. It's obvious you can't keep going on." So he advised me, "Just stay where you are, and you'll be picked up from the beach party." And but he left me with the 2 unwounded Lermans. That's how that came about.
I see.
You see, and they, as I say, I thought I was lucky because I've been caught with the Fairburn Sykes fighting knife on me, and an instruction had been issued to the German troops to execute those that were wearing it. And fortunately, because I'd been in the position where I applied morphine to this other chap, it saved my life, really. No doubt about it.
Good man.
Because when this patrol came up to me and they spoke to each other in German, I think that the German had indicated they were done, sort of thing. And it might have saved my life, I don't know.
How did you feel to have done all this training, all this amazing hard work, and then realise that your war, well, you believe your war is over at this point? Can you remember how that felt? It must have been awful.
I'll tell you what, it felt the way I felt when I was first put in the bag. Getting out was the only thing I had. The idea, first of all, is to create a situation where what people see is what they believe. I needed to make sure that at any point in time I could get down to the ground floor. The only way I could do that was by getting the nursing sister to agree to me moving different floors, which I did. And that was the only place I could get down to where I needed to go, which was where there was an incinerator where they did amputated limbs and that sort of thing. And I got involved in that, which made myself a sort of a godsend as far as the Germans were concerned, because they felt they had someone that they could rely on to deal with this running around, you know. And I did it for obvious reasons. That was to ingratiate myself with the Germans so that I was able to move around without much bother. When I jumped over the wall, because the building next door was at a much lower plane than we were up here. So I jumped over the wall to get out, and 2 or 3 members of the people helped me, never said a word. Never said a word, not regarding their surname or anything at all. never said a word. And I finished up first of all in a machine shop, which I thought was, I don't know whether they were dealing with agricultural machinery or whatever, but they were. It's a machine shop. And then I went to a safe house in a Mews place. You could drive in off the road. And I stayed there. Well, it wasn't too long, it was only a matter of a few days before the sort of rising happened in Paris, as it were. You suddenly realised what you were witnessing there was people that suddenly were free, if you know what I mean. I've never seen anywhere else because, well, when I've gone back to the Netherlands, etc., they're accustomed to it. But this was something that happened before your very eyes, you know. And you suddenly realise what freedom means. Yeah, that was the first time I met him. And I was marched into him, and he sat, he looked at his papers, and he looked up at me. I hadn't seen him before. He looked at me and he said, "What the fuck have you been messing about there in Paris then, all this time?" He was very good, yeah, Cookington. He's passed on now.
So how long are you know, you're welcome back into the battalion, you're reassessing the fact that there's nothing like the strengths that there was, so they're now recruiting back in. When are you aware that you're on another operation, another deployment?
Well, we went there by landing craft, actually, because I stepped on the deck. I can't stand the diesel down there. So, and we went on from there, from Calais, to various. We finished up at a town called Marche, M-A-R-C-H-E. That was part of the American lines there. But we didn't see very much action there at all, because by the time we got there, everything had been snowed up, and we stopped at a couple of monasteries and one thing and another. But to be perfectly honest, it was a no-show business. You know, we came back sort of after about a week or so, back to Britain. But of course, you've got to realise that at that time, manpower was low, very low. And I mean, that's one of the things that people don't seem to understand, that it's all right mounting these things, but you've got to have the resources to do it.
Was there an anticlimax to that?
Well, there was, you see. The anticlimax, I suppose, came about because of the disposition of various units. I mean, by the time that we'd actually got there, and we got to this town called Marche, there's an E on the end of that, and as I remember, there was a Russian American anti-tank gun there, which apparently had been immobilised or something. But over this side, there was a tank, and never look inside tanks. It's a nasty experience. But other than that, I mean, well, we did 1 or 2 patrols and that, but that was really what it amounted to, because everything was snowed up. Nobody really wanted to move. You see, if you stepped out on a patrol, you only had to put your foot on the ground, and the crunch, you know, you couldn't do anything, you know, you just had to grin and bear it sort of thing, you know, because there was nothing you could do about it. And but it was there's another thing there that we came to a humane band, no, B-A-N-D-E. B-A-N-D-E. And I remember going on a patrol up this road. We came to a thing had been half burned away, one thing and another. And when we looked inside, down in the basement, there were all the bodies. So we had to let the CO know what we discovered. And then we had the jobs of getting them out, and we stood them around the inner wall, there, and there. And asked the relatives come and identify them. And this is just wanton destruction of human life. That's all it was. Because the, I can't think of their name now. Humans had this unit whose sole objectives in life was to go around shooting people. And that's what happened there. To be perfectly honest about it, I mean, there were times when one felt that I don't want to go out on a patrol, for instance. There's certain things that, I mean, it's just, but it's a strange business, soldiering. See, you've got to realise that you see, when people are confronted with a life-threatening situation, they're transformed. They've got to be. I mean, if you're an enemy soldier and we come face to face, you're going to kill me or I'm going to kill you. There's no two ways about it, you know, and that is the terrible thing about warfare, really, because you're reduced to a status of animals in the wild. That's what you're reduced to, because he's going to kill me, I'm going to kill him. It's the only means you've got to survive.
It's very, very good of you to share that emotion, Fred, because that's a difficult thing, you know. I mean, you know, and that is, you're absolutely right. You know, it's you or him.
Yeah.
And were you in situations where you said to me just now that you didn't want to go on patrol? Is that because you got yourself into situations where you felt like you'd been reduced to just the sort of the core human almost?
Well, yes, yes. So there's.
How was your drop on the Rhine? Just what do you remember of coming in and stuff, and where your GZ was, etc.?
Well, they were quite good, really, because fortunately, it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and the drop lines were fairly easily recognisable. We were told to attack a place called the Schneppenberg Feature. It's a bit of high ground. And you know, of course, that we always make sure that the enemy doesn't get command of the high ground. Did you know that? Jolly good. And that was our objective anyway. And but I think the Rhine crossing really spelt the end of the Wehrmacht as such, because there wasn't much to speak of in terms of action after that anyway. Not when we were across Germany.
When you land on a drop zone like that, what's the first thing you have to do? Just talk through that sort of, you know, that training, what you did and where you went.
Well, the first thing you've got to do is get out of your chute, because you're dead duck otherwise. So you get out of your chute and you roll over, you get your weapon, well, you got your weapon with you, and that's why there's all this kit bag business and rifle releases and, you know, all sorts of things were happening.
Can you talk me through what happened next?
Well, what I did next, I had to, the company had put out, obviously, pockets of resistance, etc. And then I was given the instructions to see if I could make contact with the 17th US Airborne Division, which isn't a lot about those, but they were the 17th. I came across a field, I stepped through the wire, it's a shallow bank, so I went down there, and along there, I suppose it was about, around figures, 18. They might not have been parachutists, because I think the way they were laid out, all in a line, that they'd been killed in the glider crashes, because the Wacos were just in the field there. They come down there. And I think the way they were laid out, obviously, they're people had been there to sort of, you know, do that sort of thing. But
and were the 17th over in that area?
Well, yeah, they were actually, because they were landing zones and dropping zones were near where ours were as well. And you know, of course, you made contact to make sure that you knew who was what, etc.
And where'd you go next then?
I went back to my battalion there, having done that task. And then, of course, because the Canadian officer in charge, he was riddled. He was in a tree. But from there on in, of course, after that drop, I think the German army, from the point of view of the Wehrmacht, that is, pretty well had their lot. You know, they'd had enough. They could see the writing was on the wall, and it was pointless carrying on.
So were you chasing them out?
Yeah. But some of them were delighted to give themselves up to us to make sure the Russians didn't get them. If they farther forward, I mean, they could have been. But they just were grateful, I think, to be in, well, safe hands, really, I suppose.
And this position that you had to get that was on the high ground, did you just sort of basically walk straight into it?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, they didn't try to hold it at all. But it was a commanding position, really. In fact, if they got up there and knew what they were doing, I mean, it could have been costly from our point of view to get them off there. Oh.
How was it to get back to England after the end of the war in Europe, before you went again?
Yeah, well, we came back to England, and of course, I said they kitted us out in jungle green, everything. And we were on our way, actually. The rumour said going to jump on Singapore. Whether or not that was true, I don't know. But anyway, while we were on our way there, the bomb was dropped. And that's why we finished up in Palestine, of all places. See, from the point of view, the Power Regiment was life and soul to me. And I thought, well, eventually they're going to move people here, there, and everywhere. And I thought, well, I wouldn't like it at all. So I just decided to come out. Because when I came out, I'd had little or no schooling at all. I used to help the milkman, mainly to deliver his milk. Interesting occupation. But however, I came out of the army, and it didn't take me very long to realise that without qualifications I wouldn't get anywhere. So I stuck 2.5 years to get the higher national, and I moved on from there.
How did you cope post, straight after the war? How did you get on?
I had a little bit of that sort of thing, but nothing out there I could really, lay claim to. I mean, I had odd things. But, who doesn't?
And how do you reflect on your life as a para?
Well, I think that in joining the Paras was a good thing for me. It taught me to be very assertive. I don't mean domineering, assertive. And of course from the camaraderie, it really reminds me of a dance down in the name of it there, in the Cadena in Salisbury. And it's a bit of a fracas, finished up. And of course it finished up with all the Paras lining up, and when they go with the Yanks, you should club together, you know. I mean, if you were sort of in an opposition, like he's the 7th, I'm the 9th, I might have a go at him. But when it's split, the Britons and the Americans, it's a different situation.
Is this post-war?
Yeah.
So you're once a para, always a para?
I think that's right to say, really. But having said that, of course, if you get Paras of the same nationality, particularly in the Canadians, of course, we're the Canadian battalion in our brigade. And, you know, no problems.
Paras against the world.
Yeah.
Honestly, Fred, it's a wonderful interview.
Well, I hope you've got something out of it anyway.
Oh, good. I've got an amazing interview. I mean, I really just appreciate your candidness.
It's all right.
I felt that you were moving into some quite tricky places, but you still kept
Well,
going.
yeah, it's you've got to face up to a situation. You can't turn your back on it. You've got a situation there, and that's the way that it is, you know.